HOA Queen Constance Whitmore's scream shattered the night at 11:47 p.m. From my kitchen window, I watched her family in total meltdown under their porch light, scrambling, scrubbing frantically, absolute chaos. The sharp chlorine smell drifted over the fence, so strong it made my eyes water from 50 feet away. They were glowing, bright purple, head to toe. For 3 months, they'd trashed my pool, condoms clogging the filter, beer cans floating like toxic lily pads, warm piss every morning that made me gag. When I complained, she fined me $200 for fake violations like excessive splashing sounds. Last night I'd had enough. I slipped something subtle and invisible into the water, a special trap that activates on contact. Harmless to the pool, brutal on entitled trespassers. My Ring camera captured every second of their panic. Tomorrow's HOA meeting, I'm bringing the full evidence.
What would you do to an HOA Karen who claims your pool is hers?
Let me back up and tell you how this nightmare started. My name's Dex Hartwell, 45, recently divorced electrician who just bought his first real house in Willowbrook Estates. After years of apartment living, I finally had my dream. A gorgeous in-ground pool that sparkled like blue glass under the desert sun. Every morning at 6 a.m., I'd step onto that warm concrete deck, coffee in hand, testing chemicals and skimming leaves. The gentle hum of the filter was pure peace. This pool wasn't just luxury. It was my sanctuary after 15 years of living in other people's walls. Then I met my HOA president, Constance Whitmore, 52, real estate agent, driving a white BMW with blessed vanity plates. 8 years as HOA dictator had given her that permanent scowl, like someone who'd been tasting vinegar since birth. The kind of woman who'd measure your grass with a ruler, while her own flower beds died from neglect. Her family lived in the massive corner house next to mine. Husband Gerald, soft-spoken accountant who flinched whenever she spoke. Twin daughters, Brittany and Bethany, 20-year-old college brats who treated the neighborhood like their personal photo shoot location. Son Tanner, 17, whose lifted truck sounded like a diesel generator having a seizure. The problem started immediately. I'd wake up to find my pool water level mysteriously lower. The chemical balance I'd perfected would be completely trashed. Chlorine depleted, pH through the roof. The morning air reeked of that sharp, overused pool smell, mixed with something foul and organic that made my stomach turn. Then came the evidence. Designer flip-flops by my pool steps, beer bottles shoved behind equipment, used condoms floating in my skimmer like grotesque pool toys. The concrete felt sticky and gritty under my bare feet, that disgusting texture of dried beer, sunscreen, and bodily fluids. Worst of all, the water temperature. Every morning it felt like warm soup, murky, with that unmistakable tang of human waste that made me gag. My crystal-clear sanctuary had become someone else's toilet. But here's the thing, I wasn't Constance's only target. The Martinez family got fined $300 for culturally inappropriate garden decorations, religious statues their grandmother brought from Mexico. Keisha Roberts, the single black mother 3 houses down, paid $400 for her mailbox being non-regulation, identical to every white neighbor's mailbox. The elderly Johnson couple faced constant harassment for excessive noise during their quiet Sunday barbecues. I started connecting dots. Constance wasn't just a control freak. She was systematically targeting anyone who didn't fit her country club vision. When I finally confronted her, she stood in my driveway with arms crossed, that sour expression cranked to maximum smugness. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, voice dripping condescension. "Perhaps homeownership stress is affecting your judgment. Property boundaries can be confusing for first-time buyers." The next morning, official violation notice taped to my door. Excessive water usage during drought restrictions, $200 fine. This while her own lawn stayed lush and green, obviously getting watered every night by expensive sprinkler systems. See, I'm a working-class electrician, built this life with calloused hands and 12-hour shifts in 100-degree heat. I don't back down from bullies wearing hard hats or pearls, but Constance wielded HOA bylaws like precision weapons, and she had 8 years of practice destroying people. Every complaint I made got weaponized against me. Pool pump too noisy? Violation. Security cameras visible from street? Violation. Mailbox 2 inches off center? Another fucking violation. The smell of stale beer mixed with chlorine became my daily wake-up call. The sound of my overworked filter grinding through contaminated water haunted my nights. Between the 7th used condom and the 12th bogus fine, I reached my breaking point. Time to remind Constance that electricians know how to make things light up in very unexpected ways. I decided to fight back the only way I knew how, with evidence. First step, security cameras. I spent a weekend installing a basic 4-camera system around my pool, angling them to catch anyone stupid enough to trespass. The desert heat made the concrete so hot it burned my knees as I crawled around, drilling holes and running cables. Sweat mixed with dust until I looked like I'd been rolling in mud. The cameras caught movement, all right. Dark shapes splashing at 2 a.m., shadows dancing across my pool deck like some twisted water ballet. But the positioning was wrong. Too high, wrong angles. I could see figures moving, hear the wet slap of bare feet on concrete, but no clear faces. Then Saturday morning happened. I was skimming beer bottles from my pool when something glinted by the steps. Designer flip-flops. Tory Burch, size 7, still damp with chlorinated water. The exact brand Constance wore to every HOA meeting, while lecturing people about maintaining community standards. My electrician buddy Tony once told me something that stuck. When you're troubleshooting a short circuit, follow the evidence backward from the damage. Time to trace this particular short circuit to its source. The monthly HOA meeting was held in our beige community center that smelled like industrial carpet and broken promises. 23 homeowners showed up, most looking like they'd rather be having colonoscopies. I stood during open comments, those flip-flops in my hand like evidence at a crime scene. I'd like to discuss ongoing trespassing, I announced. Someone's using my pool without permission. I have proof. Constance didn't even flinch. She leaned into her microphone with that practiced smile that could freeze hellfire. Mr. Hartwell, these accusations are deeply concerning. Do you have actual evidence, or are we entertaining paranoid fantasies? I held up the shoes. Found these by my pool this morning, still wet. They belong to someone in this room. Dead silence. Even the ancient air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. But Constance, she was ready. This woman had been playing chess while I was playing checkers. Those could belong to anyone, she said, voice smooth as poisoned honey. And frankly, I'm disturbed by these implications. Are you seriously accusing HOA leadership of criminal behavior based on footwear? She let that hang in the air, scanning faces like a prosecutor. Perhaps we should discuss Mr. Hartwell's pattern of harassment instead. The constant complaints, the accusatory emails, the obvious campaign to undermine legitimate community leadership. I felt the room shift. Whispers started. Some neighbors actually nodded in agreement. She was flipping the script, making me the villain. Furthermore, Constance continued, and I knew I was fucked. I have serious concerns about Mr. Hartwell's electrical work. City regulations require proper permits for pool equipment modifications. Has this been inspected? My blood turned to ice water. She'd done her homework. 3 days later, a city inspector knocked on my door. Clipboard, attitude, and the personality of wet cardboard. He crawled over every wire I'd ever touched, looking for code violations like a vulture hunting carrion. The concrete felt gritty under our knees as we examined every junction box. The desert sun baking us both into human jerky. 4 hours later, nothing. Clean inspection. But the bill? $800 for absolutely unnecessary bureaucratic harassment. Constance's next move was pure genius, in the most evil way possible. Emergency assessment notice, $500 per household for critical landscaping improvements to maintain property values. Except the mailing list was very selective. My house got one. The Martinez family, Rosa and Frank, the sweetest elderly couple you'd ever meet, got one. Keisha Roberts, the single black mother who worked as a paralegal, got one. The Johnson family got one. Funny how all the white, nuclear families with perfectly trimmed hedges somehow missed that particular mailing. I started connecting with my fellow targets. Rosa Martinez, retired teacher with the organizational skills of a military general, had been documenting Constance's harassment in spiral notebooks that looked like evidence files. Her husband, Frank, construction worker with hands like weathered leather, recognized institutional bullying when he saw it. "She's systematic," Rosa told me over coffee that tasted like cinnamon and justified rage. "Same pattern every time. Find obscure rule, interpret it maliciously, weaponize it against families she doesn't like." Keisha Roberts had war stories that made my pool problems look like parking tickets. She'd been fined for excessive vehicle noise. Her 2018 Honda Civic that ran quieter than a church mouse. Apparently, leaving for work at 7 a.m. constituted disturbing community peace. The pattern crystallized. Constance was running an ethnic cleansing operation disguised as homeowners association governance. Anyone non-white, non-traditional, or non-compliant got the full harassment treatment until they moved away or shut up. But she'd picked the wrong electrician to fuck with. The smell of chlorine mixed with stale beer became my morning alarm clock. The sound of midnight splashing haunted my dreams, and every piece of evidence, wet footprints on hot concrete, sticky film on my pool chairs that felt like dried cocktail residue, only strengthened my resolve. Time to teach Constance about electrical feedback. Time to get scientific about this bullshit. I repositioned my cameras lower, added night vision capability, and finally got the evidence I needed. Crystal clear footage of Tanner and 3 friends treating my pool like their personal cesspool. The desert night air carried sounds differently. Every splash, every laugh, every disgusting belch echoed off the concrete like acoustic evidence. Watching that footage made my hands shake with pure rage. These entitled shits were pissing directly into my water, using my expensive pool furniture as diving platforms, leaving beer cans floating like toxic decorations. The worst part? One kid, definitely Tanner, actually defecated in my skimmer basket. The smell of chlorinated sewage made me dry heave just thinking about it. But anger wouldn't solve this. I needed strategy. That night, I dove into internet research with the obsessive focus of a man possessed. Forums, technical manuals, professional pool maintenance sites. My coffee grew cold as I read through pages of leak detection methods, water tracing techniques, and chemical marking systems used by professionals. Hours of scrolling led me to pure gold, fluorescein powder. Pool technicians use this stuff to trace water leaks. Add a tiny amount to suspected problem areas, and it glows brilliant green under any light source. The texture felt powdery fine between my fingers when the sample arrived, like talcum powder mixed with magic. But here's the beautiful part. It's completely harmless, FDA-approved food coloring that bonds temporarily with skin oils. The research rabbit hole got deeper. Fluorescein shows up in medical procedures, environmental testing, even fancy cocktails that glow under black lights. Zero toxicity, zero permanent damage. But anyone who swims in treated water becomes a walking neon advertisement for weeks. I ordered the industrial strength version used by plumbing professionals. $15 for enough powder to mark every trespasser in Arizona. The irony tasted sweeter than revenge itself, using legitimate pool maintenance supplies to catch people illegally using my pool. Next challenge, timing and witnesses. Constance's weekly routine was predictable as clockwork. Friday night, wine walks. Her excuse to patrol the neighborhood while mentally cataloging violations and social infractions. The evening always ended with her hosting an after-party, followed by her family's traditional midnight swim in my pool. This Friday was perfect. Our community's monthly block party meant 40-plus neighbors would be outside until late, socializing, taking photos, documenting everything on social media. If the Whitmore family took their usual swim, they'd have a ready-made audience for the glowing aftermath. I started recruiting allies carefully. Rosa Martinez became my intelligence coordinator, her retired teacher instincts making her naturally observant and methodical. She'd noticed patterns I'd missed, which nights the trespassing happened, how long the parties lasted, even which neighbors looked the other way. Tony Castellanos, my boss, understood evidence documentation from years of insurance investigations. "Dex," he said, the smell of electrical tape and copper wire filling his truck cab. "You need everything time-stamped, witnessed, and legally bulletproof. One mistake, and this backfires hard." The real game changer was Keisha Roberts. As a paralegal, she understood HOA law with surgical precision. We met over her back fence, voices low, sharing information like resistance fighters. Most HOA presidents don't know their own bylaws, she whispered, showing me printed copies of our original charter documents. These removal clauses exist in almost every development's founding papers. Systematic harassment, financial impropriety, abuse of power, any of these triggers immediate removal with simple majority vote. My pulse quickened. How simple? 51% of homeowners, that's it. No appeals, no lawyers, no lengthy process. If we can prove Constance violated her fiduciary duty, she's out. The pieces aligned like a perfect electrical circuit. Trespassing evidence plus harassment pattern equals grounds for removal. All I needed was undeniable proof that would photograph well and hold up under scrutiny. Thursday evening, I ran field tests in my garage, mixed fluorescein concentrations in various buckets, testing visibility under different lighting conditions. The garage smelled like chlorine and possibility as I fine-tuned the ratios. Too little powder, no effect. Too much, and someone might notice the water looking slightly off color. The sweet spot was barely detectable. Water appeared completely normal, but anyone swimming would absorb enough fluorescein to glow like a walking crime scene for weeks. Friday afternoon brought an unexpected development. Gerald appeared at my back gate, looking like a man drowning in shame. His wedding ring caught the sunlight as he gripped the fence, knuckles white with tension. "Dex, I need to tell you something." His voice cracked like thin ice. "My family, what they've been doing to your pool. I tried to stop it, but Constance controls everything. The money, the decisions, even what I'm allowed to say to neighbors." He glanced toward his house nervously. "Tonight's wine walk ends with another pool party. They're planning something big. Constance invited her sister's family from Phoenix. More swimmers. Perfect. More trespassers meant more glowing evidence. As desert sunset painted the sky orange and purple, I added the fluorescein to my pool water. Invisible. Odorless. Completely undetectable. But not for long. Friday evening arrived with that perfect Arizona weather that makes you understand why people move to the desert. The community block party kicked off at 7 p.m., with the smell of barbecue smoke and the sound of children's laughter filling the warm air. Tiki torches flickered along the sidewalks, casting dancing shadows that would soon hide much more interesting activities. Constance held court at the center of everything, wine glass in hand, pontificating about community standards to anyone trapped within earshot. Her voice carried that particular pitch of self-importance that could shatter glass. I watched from my front yard, nursing a beer and making small talk while my pool waited like a perfectly baited trap. The fluorescein had dissolved completely, leaving my water looking pristine and inviting. No visible trace, no unusual smell mixing with the chlorine. Just crystal clear water that would soon reveal some very ugly truths. By 10:30, the block party was winding down. Families with small children headed inside, leaving the adults to continue their conversations in smaller clusters. The desert night brought that familiar temperature drop that made everyone pull their sweaters a little tighter. Constance's after-party started right on schedule. Wine-buzzed neighbors gathered on her back patio, their laughter echoing across the fence line. I positioned myself at my kitchen window with a clear view of both properties, my phone charged and ready. Then, Gerald's warning proved prophetic. A white SUV with Phoenix plates pulled into the Whitmore driveway at 10:45. Constance's sister emerged with 3 teenage kids who looked like carbon copies of her own entitled offspring. The family reunion was about to get very interesting. The group gathered on Constance's patio, voices growing louder as wine fueled their confidence. I could smell the mix of expensive perfume and alcohol drifting on the night breeze. Through their kitchen window, I watched Constance gesturing toward my house, clearly spinning some story about her difficult neighbor. At 11:15, the migration began. 8 people, Constance's family plus her sister's crew, snuck through the back gate like amateur ninjas. The sound of whispered giggles and shushed voices carried clearly in the still air. My security cameras captured every face, every step, every moment of their trespassing. They treated my pool area like a private resort. Expensive pool floats appeared from nowhere. Someone had brought portable speakers that filled the night with obnoxious music. The concrete deck became their dance floor, bare feet slapping against the surface I'd power washed just days earlier. One by one, they entered the water. Constance went first, sliding into the deep end with the confidence of someone who believed rules didn't apply to her. The water rippled around her like liquid diamonds under the pool lights. Her sister followed, then the kids, all 8 trespassers eventually swimming in my fluorescene-laced trap. They stayed for 45 minutes, drinking my pool water, peeing in my pool water, treating my property like their personal playground. The smell of beer mixed with chlorine created that familiar nauseating cocktail that had haunted my mornings for months. At midnight, they finally climbed out. In the darkness, nothing seemed different. Wet bodies, dripping hair, the usual post-swimming chaos. They gathered their belongings, turned off the music, and snuck back through the gate like satisfied burglars. But then Tanner walked under his porch light. The transformation was instantaneous and spectacular. His skin glowed brilliant purple-green, like he'd been dipped in radioactive paint. Every inch of exposed flesh, face, arms, chest, legs, blazed with otherworldly color that seemed to pulse under the artificial light. "What the fuck?" he started to say, then stopped as he saw his glowing hands. One by one, the others moved into the light. 8 people, all glowing like walking glow sticks. Constance's perfectly coiffed hair now looked like toxic algae. Her sister's expensive swimsuit appeared to be made from alien material. The visiting kids looked like extras from a science fiction movie. The panic was immediate and beautiful. Constance started screaming, wordless, rage-filled sounds that shattered the peaceful night. She grabbed the garden hose and began frantically scrubbing her arms, but the fluorescene only glowed brighter when wet. The texture of panic was palpable in the air, mixing with the sharp scent of fear sweat and chlorinated water. Her sister tried dish soap from the outdoor kitchen. Nothing. One of the kids suggested bleach. Thank God Gerald intervened before that disaster. The visiting family stood paralyzed, glowing like living neon signs, slowly realizing they'd have to drive back to Phoenix looking like radioactive mutants. Neighbors began emerging from their houses, drawn by the commotion. Porch lights flickered on throughout the development. The smell of concerned curiosity drifted through the night as more witnesses appeared. My Ring doorbell captured everything. 8 glowing figures running around in panicked circles, scrubbing themselves raw, screaming about chemical attacks and skin poisoning. The footage looked like evidence from an alien abduction, except the aliens were just entitled assholes who'd finally been caught. Constance's voice cut through the chaos. "What the hell is on my skin?" Perfect question, and tomorrow's HOA meeting would provide the perfect answer. Saturday morning dawned with the kind of Arizona sunshine that usually makes everything look pristine and hopeful. But the Whitmore house stayed suspiciously dark, curtains drawn tight against the revealing daylight. I sipped my coffee on the back deck, savoring both the rich flavor and the sweet silence from next door. No splashing, no unauthorized laughter, just the gentle hum of my pool filter working normally for the first time in months. The fluorescene was performing exactly as advertised. Through their kitchen window, I caught glimpses of purple-tinged figures moving around like living mood rings. Even in dim indoor lighting, they glowed with that unmistakable otherworldly radiance. By 9 a.m., Constance attempted damage control. She called 3 neighbors. I could hear her voice carrying through the thin desert air, pitched at that special frequency of desperate authority. The story kept changing with each call. First, she was investigating suspected pool contamination for community safety. Then she was conducting an authorized HOA inspection. Finally, she claimed someone had chemically assaulted her family during a routine property check. The beauty of obvious lies is how they collapse under their own weight. Rosa Martinez knocked on my door around 10 a.m., her weathered face fighting back a smile that could light up Las Vegas. "Dex, you need to see the neighborhood Facebook page," she said, pulling out her phone with the satisfaction of someone about to deliver perfect gossip. Someone posted pictures. The social media explosion was everything I'd hoped for and more. Grainy cell phone photos of glowing figures stumbling around the Whitmore yard. Videos of Constance hosing herself down like a contaminated hazmat worker. Commentary ranging from confused concern to barely suppressed laughter. But the real magic happened when other families started sharing their stories. Keisha Roberts posted a detailed timeline of her harassment, complete with photographs of violation notices and fine calculations. The Johnson family shared their documentation of noise complaints for Sunday barbecues that lasted exactly 90 minutes. Frank Martinez uploaded pictures of his non-compliant garden decorations, beautiful religious statues that had graced their yard for 15 years. A pattern emerged that was impossible to ignore: systematic targeting, discriminatory enforcement, financial harassment disguised as community governance. The purple evidence made everything undeniable. Constance tried spinning the narrative through her remaining loyalists, but glowing skin isn't something you can gaslight away. Her sister's family had already fled back to Phoenix, probably explaining to their neighbors why they looked like extras from a superhero movie. Around noon, Constance attempted her nuclear option. She called the Maricopa County Sheriff's Department, reporting chemical weapons assault and demanding immediate arrest of her terrorist neighbor. The concrete felt warm under my bare feet as I watched the patrol car pull up, its presence drawing even more neighbors outside to witness the spectacle. Deputy Patricia Williams climbed out, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who looked like she'd seen every variety of human stupidity. She took one look at Constance, still faintly glowing in broad daylight, and I could see her professional bullshit detector activate. "Ma'am, you called about chemical assault?" Williams asked, her tone suggesting she already knew this was going to be interesting. Constance launched into her prepared victim statement, gesturing wildly at her still luminescent arms. "This man poisoned his pool to attack my family. We were conducting legitimate HOA business, and he used illegal chemicals to assault us." Williams examined the evidence with trained eyes. "What kind of chemicals are we talking about?" That's when I stepped forward with my research printouts and product documentation. "Officer, it's fluorescein powder, FDA-approved food coloring used for pool leak detection. Completely harmless, professionally manufactured for water testing." I handed her the technical specifications, safety data sheets, and purchase receipts. Everything legal, everything documented, everything professional. Williams studied the papers, then looked at Constance. "Ma'am, you were in his pool without permission?" The question hung in the desert air like heat shimmer. Constance's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water, but no words came out. "Because that would be trespassing," Williams continued. "And if you were trespassing on private property, any security measures the homeowner employed would be considered self-defense." Gerald chose that moment to emerge from the house, still glowing but radiating something more important: honesty. His voice shook as he spoke. "Officer, my family has been using Mr. Hartwell's pool without permission for months. I tried to stop them, but..." He looked at Constance with decades of suppressed frustration. "She said it was our right, as HOA leadership." The silence that followed tasted like justice mixed with morning coffee. Williams closed her notepad and looked directly at me. "Mr. Hartwell, do you want to press charges for trespassing?" Finally, the question I'd been waiting months to hear. "Yes, I absolutely want to press charges." Those 6 words felt like electricity coursing through copper wire. Clean, powerful, and impossible to stop. Deputy Williams nodded and began documenting the crime scene while Constance stood there glowing like a neon confession. The next 72 hours became a masterclass in evidence compilation. I gathered 3 months of security footage, organizing it chronologically with timestamps and weather data. The videos told a complete story: escalating trespassing, property damage, and contemptuous disregard for basic boundaries. Rosa Martinez contributed her meticulous harassment documentation, spiral notebooks filled with dates, quotes, and photographic evidence that would make FBI agents jealous. Tony Castellanos brought professional expertise to the legal preparation. Years of dealing with insurance fraud had taught him how evidence needs to be presented to survive legal scrutiny. "Documentation is everything," he explained, the smell of fresh ink mixing with coffee as we printed witness statements. "Judges see bullshit every day. What they respect is organized, professional evidence that tells an undeniable story." But Keisha Roberts delivered the nuclear option. She'd been conducting her own investigation into HOA finances, using her paralegal training to request documents that Constance legally couldn't refuse. What she found made the trespassing look like jaywalking. "Look at these landscaping contracts," Keisha said, spreading papers across my kitchen table like a poker hand holding 4 aces. "Same work, billed twice. Once to the HOA General Fund, once to a special assessment account that doesn't exist in our original charter." The numbers were staggering. Over 3 years, Constance had embezzled more than $40,000 through inflated contracts, duplicate billing, and phantom improvement projects. She'd been running the HOA like her personal ATM, funding her lifestyle with community money while harassing families who questioned her authority. The financial crimes explained everything. Discriminatory enforcement wasn't just about control. It was about eliminating witnesses who might discover her theft. Every family she'd driven away, every neighbor she'd silenced with harassment, was potential evidence she couldn't afford to leave behind. My electrician's brain immediately grasped the beautiful irony. Constance had been systematically overloading the community's trust until something had to blow. The fluorescein incident was just the visible spark from a much bigger electrical fire. Wednesday brought unexpected support from an official source. County Commissioner Patricia Lane, a friend of Rose's from their teaching days, requested copies of our evidence for a broader investigation into HOA accountability. We've received multiple complaints about Willowbrook Estate's governance, Lane explained during a quiet meeting in Rose's living room. Your documentation provides the missing pieces we needed to authorize a formal audit. The smell of Rose's homemade cookies, mixed with the satisfaction of institutional backup. Real oversight was finally coming to our little kingdom of corruption. Gerald's cooperation proved crucial. Years of financial abuse had left him desperate for escape, and he possessed insider knowledge of Constance's methods. He provided bank statements, forged signature examples, and testimony about coercive control that painted a disturbing picture of domestic and community abuse. She made me sign blank checks, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Said it was for operational efficiency. I didn't know she was using them to pay herself consulting fees for work she never did. By Thursday evening, we had everything needed for criminal prosecution and civil recovery. Trespassing charges, embezzlement evidence, harassment documentation, and witness testimony from 15 affected families. The purple stains on the Whitmore family were finally fading, but the evidence they'd created would last forever. Sometimes, the most effective traps are the ones people walk into themselves. Friday's emergency community meeting was going to be very interesting. Thursday night brought Constance's most desperate gambit yet. She called an emergency HOA board meeting for Friday morning, citing community safety concerns and terrorist threats that required immediate action. The hastily printed notice, delivered to only select houses, accused me of chemical weapons deployment and demanded emergency suspension of my pool privileges. But Constance had made a critical error. She'd forgotten that half the current board members were already questioning her leadership after months of complaints. The meeting convened in the community center at 8 a.m., with the morning desert air still carrying that crisp coolness that disappears by noon. Constance arrived wearing long sleeves, despite the climbing temperature, trying to hide the fading purple marks that still dotted her arms like evidence of guilt. I showed up with Rosa, Keisha, and printed copies of our complete evidence file. The smell of fresh ink mixed with nervous sweat as neighbors filled seats, many clutching their own documentation of harassment and financial abuse. Board member Janet Pierce, a retired nurse who'd grown tired of Constance's authoritarian bullshit, called for order and immediately dropped a bombshell. Before we address Mrs. Whitmore's emergency motion, I'd like to discuss the county audit notice we received yesterday morning. You could have heard a scorpion scuttle across concrete in that silence. Audit? Constance's voice cracked like thin ice under pressure. Full financial review of the past 3 years, Janet continued, consulting her notes with medical precision. Triggered by community complaints about irregular expenditures and discriminatory enforcement. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as Constance realized her financial house of cards was collapsing. Her face went through a spectrum of colors that almost matched her fading purple skin. But cornered animals are dangerous, and Constance was about to prove it. This is clearly a coordinated attack on legitimate HOA governance, she announced, standing with the desperate authority of a dictator facing revolution. Mr. Hartwell has poisoned community relationships with his paranoid accusations and vigilante behavior. She gestured toward me like a prosecutor addressing a jury. He's used chemical weapons against residents, violated our privacy with surveillance equipment, and now he's weaponizing county bureaucracy to undermine elected leadership. The board split exactly as I'd hoped. Janet Pierce and 2 other members looked skeptical. 2 longtime Constance loyalists nodded in agreement. One member, Frank Delano, who'd been fence-sitting for years, would cast the deciding vote. Constance played her final card. I move for immediate removal of Mr. Hartwell's pool privileges and installation of professional security monitoring to prevent future chemical attacks on community members. That's when Keisha Roberts stood up, paralegal training and righteous anger combining into pure legal destruction. "Point of order," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who actually knew what she was talking about. "Mrs. Whitmore lacks authority to restrict private property use without documented safety violations and community vote." She pulled out printed HOA bylaws, flagging specific sections with the precision of a legal sniper. Furthermore, the Emergency Powers Clause requires unanimous board approval and written notice to all residents 48 hours prior to implementation. This meeting fails to meet either requirement. Frank Delano, clearly uncomfortable with the procedural violations, shifted in his seat. "Constance, did you follow proper notice requirements?" "Emergency situations don't require," Constance started. "Yes, they do," Keisha interrupted, citing specific bylaw sections. "Emergency powers are limited to genuine threats to community safety. Homeowner property protection measures don't qualify." The vote, when it came, was beautifully decisive. 3-2 against Constance's motion. But losing the board vote only made her more dangerous. That evening, my garage door got tagged with "terrorist" in bright red spray paint. The acrid smell of fresh paint mixed with desert dust as I documented the vandalism with photographs and measurements. My security cameras caught everything, including the teenagers Constance had clearly paid to do her dirty work. The kids were sloppy, leaving empty paint cans in the community dumpster with their fingerprints all over everything. When Deputy Williams reviewed the footage, she recognized 2 of them as Constance's nephew's friends from Phoenix. General showed up at my door around midnight, looking like a man who'd finally reached his breaking point. His hands shook as he handed me a manila folder thick with financial documents. "Bank statements," he whispered, glancing nervously toward his own house, "showing every fake contract payment, every forged signature, every dollar she stole." His voice cracked with decades of suppressed shame. I kept copies because I knew this day would come. The papers felt heavy with more than just weight. They carried the evidence to destroy Constance's entire operation. Duplicate payments to landscaping companies that never existed. Consulting fees paid to shell corporations she controlled. Community funds transferred to personal investment accounts. "She made me an accomplice," Gerald continued, tears mixing with residual anger. "But I won't let her destroy anyone else's life." The concrete felt cold under our feet as we stood in my driveway, 2 men finally ready to fight back against years of systematic abuse. Tomorrow's community meeting was going to be explosive. Friday evening's emergency community meeting transformed Willowbrook Estates into something resembling a democratic revolution. Word had spread through neighborhood networks, with the efficiency of gossip mixed with genuine outrage. By 6 p.m., 87 residents packed our community center, the largest gathering in development history. The smell of nervous energy, mixed with determination, filled the air like electricity before a thunderstorm. Local media had caught wind of the story. Channel 7's Maria Santos arrived with a camera crew, drawn by social media videos of glowing purple neighbors and stories of HOA corruption that sounded too bizarre to be true. Her presence added weight to everything we documented. County Commissioner Patricia Lane attended as an official observer, her notebook ready to document anything that might require county intervention. The institutional support felt like reinforcement, arriving just when the battle was getting serious. Constance entered like a woman walking to her execution, still wearing long sleeves despite the evening heat. Her remaining supporters, maybe 8 people total, clustered around her like a protective circle that couldn't quite hide their own doubt. Rosa Martinez called the meeting to order, with the natural authority of someone who'd managed classrooms full of unruly teenagers. "We're here to address systemic issues with HOA governance and financial management." I presented our evidence methodically, letting facts speak louder than accusations. Security footage showing months of trespassing, financial documents revealing systematic embezzlement, witness testimony from 15 families detailing harassment and discrimination. The visual evidence was devastating. Video of purple-stained figures stumbling around yards like guilty ghosts. Bank statements showing identical payments to non-existent contractors. HOA violation notices that revealed clear patterns of racial and economic targeting. But Gerald's testimony delivered the killing blow. He walked to the front of the room, carrying the weight of years of complicity and shame. His voice started quiet, but grew stronger with each revelation. "My wife has been embezzling community funds for 3 years," he said, the words falling like stones into still water. "She forged my signature on checks, created fake vendors, and used HOA money to pay for personal expenses, including our Phoenix vacation home." The room erupted. Shouts of anger, demands for details, calls for immediate action. Through it all, Constance sat frozen, watching her carefully constructed empire crumble in real time. Maria Santos captured everything, her camera crew documenting democracy in action, as residents demanded accountability from someone who'd forgotten she worked for them, not the other way around. "How much?" someone shouted from the back. Gerald consulted his notes. $47,000 in direct theft, another $15,000 in inflated contracts where she kept the difference. The numbers hit like physical blows. These were people who struggled to pay the legitimate HOA fees. Watching someone steal money meant for community improvements, while simultaneously harassing them with fake violations. Keisha Roberts stood with printed removal petitions. "Under original charter bylaws, we can remove president and board members for financial impropriety with a simple majority vote." She'd done the legal homework. 68 signatures were needed for removal. We had 73 confirmed supporters in attendance, with more arriving every minute. Commissioner Lane stepped forward when the petition was presented. "Before any votes, I need to inform everyone that criminal charges are being filed. The county prosecutor's office will be handling embezzlement and fraud allegations separately from community governance." Constance finally found her voice, but it came out as a strangled wail of desperate self-justification. "You're all making a terrible mistake," she screeched, standing with the manic energy of someone watching their world burn. "I've dedicated 8 years to improving this community. These accusations are based on lies and conspiracy theories spread by a mentally unstable neighbor who attacked my family with chemicals." The room's response was immediate and unified: laughter. Not cruel amusement, but the release that comes when obvious lies finally get called out publicly. Rosa Martinez held up photographs of the glowing trespassers. "Constance, you were caught on camera in someone else's pool at midnight. The chemicals were harmless pool dye that proved you were stealing Mr. Hartwell's water." More laughter. Even some of Constance's remaining supporters looked embarrassed to be associated with such obviously dishonest leadership. The vote wasn't close. 79 residents voted for immediate removal. 8 voted against. 2 abstained, probably out of simple politeness. When the results were announced, the room exploded in applause that could be heard 3 blocks away. Neighbors hugged, children cheered, and Maria Santos got footage of genuine community celebration. Constance stormed out, screaming threats about lawsuits and appeals, but her words carried no weight. She was just another angry person shouting at democracy, powerless to stop it. The taste of victory was sweeter than Rosa's homemade flan. After years of systematic abuse, the community had finally remembered its own power. But the legal system still had work to do. 6 weeks later, the Maricopa County Courthouse became the stage for Constance Whitmore's final performance. The criminal trial drew media attention from across the Phoenix metro area. Purple Pool Karen had become internet shorthand for HOA corruption, with our story inspiring investigations into community associations throughout Arizona. The courthouse steps buzzed with reporters, community members, and curious observers drawn by a case that seemed ripped from social media legend. I arrived wearing my best electrician's dress shirt, clean, pressed, and carrying 3 months of meticulous documentation. The smell of courthouse disinfectant mixed with nervous energy as residents from Willowbrook Estates filled the gallery, many holding their own evidence files. District Attorney Rebecca Grant had assembled an overwhelming case: embezzlement, fraud, criminal trespassing, filing false police reports, and intimidation of witnesses. Each charge backed by documentation that would make accountants weep with admiration. Constance's defense attorney, some expensive Phoenix lawyer who clearly regretted taking this case, attempted to paint her as a dedicated volunteer, overwhelmed by complex financial responsibilities. The strategy collapsed immediately when Prosecutor Grant presented bank records showing systematic theft disguised as community improvements. But the moment everyone waited for came when Gerald took the witness stand. He'd lost 30 pounds since filing for divorce, looking healthier despite the stress of testifying against his wife of 25 years. His voice was steady as he detailed years of financial abuse, forged signatures, and coercive control that extended from their marriage into community governance. "She made me sign blank checks," he testified, pulling out copies of bank statements. "Said it was for HOA efficiency. I didn't know she was using them to pay herself consulting fees for work that was never performed." Defense tried to characterize Gerald as a bitter ex-husband seeking revenge, but the prosecutor had physical evidence: security footage of me discovering trespassers, bank records showing fraudulent transactions, and witness testimony from 15 families detailing systematic harassment. When my turn came, I presented the fluorescein evidence with scientific precision: product specifications, safety data sheets, professional usage guidelines, everything proving that pool dye was legitimate leak detection equipment, not some backyard chemistry experiment. The prosecutor held up photographs taken under UV light, showing faint purple traces still visible on Constance's skin weeks after the incident. "Mr. Hartwell," she asked, "why did you choose this particular method to catch trespassers?" "Because it was safe, legal, and undeniable," I replied, looking directly at Constance. "I wanted evidence that couldn't be explained away or dismissed as coincidence." The defense attorney's cross-examination backfired spectacularly. "Isn't it true that you deliberately set a trap to humiliate Mrs. Whitmore?" "I set a trap to catch whoever was illegally using my pool," I corrected. "Mrs. Whitmore humiliated herself by being there at midnight without permission." The courtroom rippled with suppressed laughter. Even the judge seemed to be fighting a smile. But the prosecution's masterpiece came when they presented the complete financial fraud timeline. Grant used a PowerPoint presentation that would have made corporate auditors applaud, showing exactly how Constance had systematically looted community funds, while using HOA authority to silence anyone who might discover her crimes. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Grant concluded, "this wasn't just theft. This was a criminal enterprise disguised as neighborhood governance, using fear and intimidation to cover systematic embezzlement." The jury deliberated for exactly 97 minutes, guilty on all counts. Judge Patricia Morrison, a no-nonsense woman who'd clearly seen enough HOA horror stories, delivered a sentence that felt like cosmic justice: 18 months in county jail, full restitution of $62,000, including interest and penalties, 5 years probation, and permanent prohibition from holding any HOA leadership position in Arizona. "Mrs. Whitmore," the judge said, her voice carrying the weight of institutional authority, "you betrayed the trust of an entire community. You used your position to enrich yourself while systematically harassing residents who challenged your authority. This court finds your actions particularly egregious because they targeted vulnerable families and violated the basic principles of democratic governance." The gavel fell with the finality of electricity completing a circuit. Outside the courthouse, Maria Santos interviewed residents who'd driven 90 minutes to witness Constance's downfall. Rosa Martinez, now serving as interim HOA president, summed up the community's feelings. "Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about restoring trust and making sure this never happens again." Gerald, standing with his divorce papers and a newfound spine, offered the perfect epilogue. "Sometimes it takes getting caught purple-handed to see the truth clearly. The taste of victory was better than any revenge fantasy. We'd proven that communities could fight back against petty tyranny, that evidence trumped authority, and that sometimes the simplest solutions create the most powerful justice." Constance Whitmore's reign of terror was finally over, but the real work of rebuilding was just beginning. 1 year later, Willowbrook Estates had transformed into something remarkable, a community that actually functioned like a community. Rosa Martinez's presidency brought transparency that would have made government reformers jealous. Monthly financial statements posted online, open book policies, and decision-making that involved actual resident input rather than dictatorial decree. The smell of her weekend barbecues mixed with the sound of children laughing in pools they were actually invited to use. The embezzlement restitution funded projects that benefited everyone: new playground equipment that kids actually wanted to play on, community garden plots where families could grow vegetables together, a scholarship fund for neighborhood students that had already sent 3 kids to Arizona State University with full support. My pool became the unofficial community gathering spot, hosting pool and politics meetings, where democracy happened in swimming trunks and flip-flops. The chlorine finally smelled clean again, mixed with legitimate laughter and the satisfaction of water being used for its intended purpose. Gerald's transformation was the most dramatic. The divorce had freed him from decades of psychological abuse, and he discovered a talent for financial management that served the community well as our new treasurer. His quarterly reports were models of clarity that resident associations across Phoenix now used as templates. "I spent 25 years enabling financial fraud," he told me over coffee, "that tasted like redemption mixed with fresh hope. Now I get to make sure every penny serves the people who paid it." The kids, even Tanner, had found better outlets for their energy. Community service requirements turned into genuine engagement. Tanner now maintained pools for elderly residents who couldn't handle the physical demands anymore. The twins started a neighborhood newsletter that actually informed rather than intimidated. But the sweetest development was personal. Maria Santos and I discovered that shared interests in justice and truth-telling extended beyond professional journalism. Our first date was reviewing HOA bylaws over dinner, romantic in the most wonderfully nerdy way possible. 6 months later, she moved into my house, bringing her investigative instincts and morning coffee routine that made every day feel like a small celebration. The fluorescein powder, $15 worth of harmless chemical, had triggered changes worth hundreds of thousands in recovered funds and immeasurable improvements in community trust. Pool supply companies now stock it as trespasser detection dye, and my story has inspired similar accountability efforts in developments across Arizona. Constance served her full sentence, emerging from county jail to find Willowbrook Estates had moved on without her. She relocated to Scottsdale, where hopefully some other community will recognize the warning signs before letting authoritarian tendencies metastasize into criminal enterprise. The legal precedent our case established led to state legislation requiring annual financial audits for all HOAs over 50 units. Community associations can no longer operate as personal fiefdoms without oversight. Democracy, it turns out, works better with transparency and accountability. 3 families avoided foreclosure because bogus fines were eliminated. The scholarship fund has grown to support 12 students annually. Property values increased because people actually want to live in communities that function properly, rather than surviving under petty dictatorships. But the most important change was psychological. Residents learned they had power when they worked together. They discovered that documentation trumps authority, that evidence beats intimidation, and that sometimes the simplest solutions, like pool dye, can illuminate the darkest corruption. The kids splashing in my pool this evening represent hope that democracy can actually work when people remember they're supposed to participate rather than simply submit. My Ring doorbell now captures birthday parties instead of criminal trespassing. The sound of genuine community gatherings has replaced midnight theft. And every time I test my pool chemicals, clean, balanced, and legally used, I remember that standing up to bullies sometimes changes much more than just your own circumstances.